Now, yesterday we talked about Windows. We talked about a couple of different other, properties and attributes of your other three basically operating systems. As I told you yesterday as well, we are beginning to see lots more desktop operating system environments adopted, and people are becoming very, very familiar with using the other operating systems. So you're starting to see Linux and Mac OS both sort of encroach on Windows and are getting to a point to where they're going to start nipping at the heels of Windows and claiming more and more of that desktop and even some cases your server space. Now, there are lots of different server class machines, especially web servers, whether it's internet, intranet, or extranet type servers that are already using Linux-based operating systems. Um, those are already, I think, probably worldwide. They claim most of the server space anyway. But still, Windows has quite the edge over all of the other operating systems from the desktop perspective. But that's going to be rapidly changing here in the not too distant future. One of the reasons being, of course, that Linux is free, and they have several different Linux distribution types, and they are all of them now just about beginning to include really slick looking, well designed graphic user interfaces so that it gives the users that navigation capability, much like we've had in Windows and Mac OS forever. So they're starting to adopt that more, and the fact that any application software that you need, you can find half a dozen or more copies of it out on the web, and they're all free. So I talked about these management consoles, and I encouraged you all to make certain that you download the MMC list that I gave you. Every one of the management consoles in the Windows environment, the device manager, disk manager, computer manager, your event manager, task manager, all of those have an underlying command that will bring those up as well. Now, the device manager is what allows me. We looked at that yesterday. It allows me to update device properties and the characteristics. I can update device drivers. I can uninstall devices, install new devices. I can turn them on and I'll basically restart them. This is what the device manager panel looks like itself. All of the devices that are inherent on the machine are listed on the left-hand side over here. And any one of those that you expand or click on, in this case, the keyboards, updates the right-hand panel with your properties panel. That's where I can, again, go in and uninstall, update drivers, check the details of the device, see if indeed it falls under any of my power plans, my power management plans. I can check that status and even update that status on there as well. Here's where, in any of these devices that are listed here, if I do a right click on those, well, it brings up this menu here where I can uninstall it or I can update the driver as you see there. I can, the system by default will track changes that I make to the device, and I can scan the device and see if there's any changes been made, things like that. Same thing with the disk manager. Oh, going back here, the device manager, the MMC to pull this guy up is DEV MGMT. So it will bring this up for me, and that's just a command executable. Same thing with this, the disk manager, DISK MGT. It will allow me to partition disk, initialize disk, basically reformat the disk, all of the disk drives, physical disk drives that I have, as well as my optical drives, the Blu-ray, DVD, so on. There's my disk manager, disk management console. It and the command line to bring this up too. We looked at it yesterday. DISK MGMT, and you can run it from the command line, or this guy you can get to from your settings menu, your control panel, your computer manager, system menu, typically. Um, all of these management applets have multiple paths that you can use to get to them. Now, some of these, of course, actually drive administrative level functions. And in order to have access to use those functions, of course, you'll have to have the administrative access on the system. Disk defragmenter, another applet, allows me to basically clean the disk up. I was telling you guys earlier in the week, I have a process set up that runs every morning at 3 a.m. on my network and my systems here. I only have two of the systems that are hard disk drive systems, and I run the system file checker, the check disk command, the disk cleanup utilities, defragmenter commands, and it does it automatically. So my systems are constantly on a nightly basis, actually compressed, cleaned up, things like that. This will work on both your hard disk drives and your solid state drives, but the process, the function it actually performs is a wee bit different. Because like I was telling you guys earlier in the week, the solid state drives don't have any moving parts. They don't have the magnetic disk service. It's all chip based stuff. So a little bit different concept as far as cleaning those disks up. I can this again is sort of a compression optimization kind of thing here. Reorganizes the disk drive for me. And especially with the hard disk drives. I told you guys the other day, the hard disk platter sits on a spindle and the read write heads travel back and forth on the disk like this. And they read the data. That they don't make contact with the surface, but they read the data from the top and the bottom, typically, of the disk drives that are installed nowadays. The disks become fragmented over a period of time because people tend to think that if I write a file onto a disk, that it starts here and all the way around on this same track and ends here. That's not at all how it works, because the disk drive itself in a system is typically shared by many, many different processes. And the computer and the CPU and the management source code in there, the firmware code, it actually divvies up time slices, as it were, to all of the different functions that are attempting to use the drive. So if you're writing a file, you get a certain time slice. When that expires, another process does. So it has written all of the file that it can of yours. Some other process kicks in, it does something, and then you get it back, and it may write the other chunks of the file in completely different areas on the disk. So compressing the disk and defragmenting it clears up any free space and sort of reorganizes the disk so that it sort of ties all those little chunks of data that are written all over the drive together, and that your index pointers know where all of those segments are. So that's what the maintenance tools do or allow you to do on a regular basis. Now, there's some functions that Windows now, like defragment functions on hard disk drives. Windows will, by default, automatically do those things on a periodic basis for you. So it keeps the disk running lean and mean, good seek times and that kind of thing. Task Scheduler is a means of scheduling tasks to run in the future. I can schedule the task to run on particular date times. I can have tasks run based on certain events occurring and then triggering the task to run. Task Scheduler, the Task Manager, just like all of your other administrative tools on the system, it generates log entries, and you can track the logs and see what the Task Manager, the Task Scheduler actually performed. So, and you go in and you configure those. Now, in the Linux environment, they call these cron jobs, CRON. Same concept. You schedule things to run in the future based on some timing event, usually. And you have complete control of that. I mentioned to you earlier as well, if you have administrative capability, you can add, delete, change user and group profiles. You can manage all the attributes, properties, and characteristics of the user profiles. You can assign things like passwords, access and permissions to individual items, files, folders, directories, so on in the system. You can create these large sort of umbrella functions they call it security groups. And then the security groups provide high-level permissions as they relate to certain objects in your network, files, folders, directories again. And then you can assign those security groups to either a group of users or an individual user. And by way of the directory access and permission services, it applies those securities to an individual or, again, a user group. Now, I spoke sort of in passing the other day about digital certificates. Digital certificate is a concept where you either purchase or have software to create your own, in essence, certificate authority. And for instance, when you guys visited my website the other day, my website's secure. So you fire your browser up, it attaches to my website. And then the website does a couple of things, and these occur so rapidly you really don't see them happen, but they're happen almost immediately. I installed a digital certificate on my web server. There's a public key and a private key associated with that digital certificate. So 2 keys always. So when you attach to my site immediately sends down a copy of my digital certificate and the public key of the set to your browser. Your browser then, first thing it does is validates that digital certificate is still active, it's still in play, it's still being used. And it does that. It basically sends out a message either locally in your network or out on a CA server somewhere out in the World Wide Web. And it looks and says, yep, that certificate's still good. Then a couple of things, again, very fast happen. Your address bar on your browser turns to HTTPS if it's not already. The padlock icon that we looked at, it shows locked. And then in many of the browsers, the address bar still turns green. So then the private key, which remains up on my server, and the public key, which is resident on your system now, the way that mine works, and a lot of them nowadays, they negotiate real time what the encryption algorithms and what the protection is going to be during that session for any data that's exchanged during that session. But again, this stuff happens so rapidly, you don't really see it. There is this
Sir,
certificate. Yes, go ahead, Kate.
can you see certificates in the TCP dump log?
Well, you can see the access to those, but you can't really see the certificate per se.
Okay.
You can see that it was accessed and that the website is a secured site, those kind of things. Yeah.
Okay. Thank
Yes, ma'am. And I was telling you all week long, you're asking the best questions. I really like that. Um, the certificate authority is something that oftentimes is a commercial product. And there's several certificate authorities out there that people purchase them from. The very first one that came about and actually commercialized the whole concept, even though they didn't really invent the technology, was a company called RSA. And they will sell, in essence, digital certificates to the public at large. And they actually use encryption algorithms that were created by, and RSA is the last name, is the acronym for the last names. It's Ronald Rivest, Shamir, and Adelman are the last names of the 3 folks that launched that. They used technologies and algorithms that were actually created by 2 other encryption developers and engineers. And it was a Diffie, last name Diffie and Hellman. So the Diffie-Hellman algorithm was what is the underlying framework of the technology, but RSA just successfully packaged it and brought it to the commercial marketplace first. You can internally, and lots of especially large enterprise organizations are just they have become their own certificate authority. In the Windows environment, you've got these certificate manager and both for individual users or for computer systems. And it's a panel that looks like this. It's another applet. And you manage the whole functionality of either setting up your own CA or installing and tracking digital certificates from outside entities. There's RSA, there's a VeriSign is another organization, Komodo. There's a good dozen of very well-known reputable CAs out there. Now, another thing that is I would say, relatively new to the Windows environment. And when I say relatively new, within the last couple of decades, is they started introducing this group policy and security policy environment and editor. One of the really cool things it allows me to do is to enforce configurations on a particular Windows system. I can have users, when they go to log into a system, run a login script in essence, and it downloads these group policy objects from typically a domain controller, a domain server, and it applies it to their local machine. I can have it update my local settings without having to manually make the changes in that particular system's registry. And I can have it enforce things such as password policies, configuration, software, hardware configuration, and I can even use it to enforce compliance. I mentioned to you yesterday, we were talking about the mobile systems. Some of the things I can do with these group policy objects is look into a device when they go to log into my network, and if that device is not in compliance with my software hardware compliance rules and regulations, well, they don't get to log in. So I can enforce quite a bit of compliance and just rules and regulations of my organization, configuration and security wise as well. There is a um, group policy object editor. I can go in, set these things up, and then apply those, download them, and apply those to individual host machines. Now, the Windows registry is an area that I used to teach a 3-day class, just 3-day whole class on just using and editing and the whole concept of the Windows registry. Inside the registry, there are 5 what we call hives or subtrees, as it were. And the Windows registry actually gives me the ability of in essence configuring everything there is to configure about the system. I can set up and define characteristics of what the machine's configuration is, hardware, software. I can set up and control the characteristics of users, any users that's ever been defined for the system, as well as the current user that's logged into it. All the user's properties and attributes and definitions and requirements, etc., all their preferences. I also can, there's a hive here, the first one they're called classes root, which is, it defines all of the specific file types that are supported by the particular machine, as well as gives me the ability of associating, for instance, an application program that will allow me to either display or edit or execute those files. For instance, if I have a file type that is the Excel file type, XLS, or that's the Excel program that I associate with that. So if somebody just double clicks on that file, it knows that you open it up with Excel. Okay. There is an editor, it's called regedit, in the Windows environment there, where you can go in and down at the individual data item level, edit the entries here. But I will caution you, without doing lots of under the covers study and figuring out how the registry is structured, um, all of the areas that it does address, be very, very cautious in changing anything in the Windows registry, because I have seen people not knowing what they were doing, get down there just playing around with the entries and make their system unusable. So you got to be really cautious. I'll give you guys later on. There's a couple of tutorials that students sent me the copies of these. There's one, a YouTube tutorial, and one that's on board with Microsoft Learning. I'll make those available to you guys later on, and just for additional learning. Now, this certification exam, they're not going to dig too deep into that at all. But you just need to be aware that the Windows registry itself is a means of overall defining the system setup, user properties, attributes, file support, local system, hardware, software configurations, etc. So Now, I've mentioned a couple of times, and we've already made reference to several of these management consoles, these applets, they call them. Every one of these has a very specific purpose, and it provides you that graphic user interface access to these management applet programs. You can create your own. This console editor here will allow me to basically set up my own management console. Let's say that uh, you realize that the job function you're performing, out of all of these couple of dozen functions that are available with these management applets, you use five, six of them every day, all day. That's the ones you use. Well, you can create your own and basically customize your applet program to only have the items that you use. Okay. Um, I have done this a couple of times, but then realized that, well, yeah, but sometimes I do need that device manager, or sometimes I do need to use that hypervisor setup program. So, while it's a fun exercise to set up and customize your own, it's certainly not anything that's required in order to be able to drive the computer. Okay. Now, those are the applets. There are several dozens of those, and that a file that I gave you guys for download the other day, it's called MMC list, and it's just a listing of all of the command utilities that will display and make available these management console applets to you. And again, the reason I gave, you if you find yourself out and about somewhere and the system won't boot all the way up, but you get to a command line, well, if you know those commands, then you can typically fire those utilities up, applet up, and use those, real time. There are several of the commands, your command line interface. We looked at that a couple of times. We'll go ahead and fire it up again here and show you some, additionally, some other stuff. The command prompt is, it's very similar to they call it a terminal window in other operating system environments. Here's what it looks like. And I got to this, and you guys can do the same thing. You can, on your search bar, you can just type in CMD or start typing command. You'll get an option that pops up there and allows you to get this terminal window up here. Now, this runs the Windows shell program. That is your CLI, your command line interface. I told you the other day, if you want to see all the commands, type help. Okay. These are the commands that are available to you at the command line interface. And it gives you a relatively decent description of what the commands do. There are some of your administrative level types of commands that aren't exposed here. If any of if you want to see, let's say the shutdown command, if I want to look at help text specifically for the shutdown command, I type in the command, followed by a blank space, a forward slash, and a question mark. And that gives me the description and the documentation for that particular command. Okay? So it gives me what all the options are, gives me further definition on what the options will do. And in a lot of cases, when you're looking at the help text on these things, it will even give you example utilization. It will, the shutdown and then a couple of options, and here's what that will produce. And all the help text is right online here. Okay. Everything that you have on that. Now, and the command line is always available. If you, I mentioned interrupting your boot process, going into the setup menu, more often than not, you can get to a command line. So knowing what those commands and the utilization of those do, and knowing the MMC list, the management console commands, that bring up, I showed you guys yesterday, day before, I'm going to bring up my computer manager, COMP MGMT. Now it's going to pop it up on my primary screen like it did yesterday, but I will drag it over and show you. So running the command brings up the command applet, the program over here. And I can use it right here. And the thing about this computer manager, showed you this the other day as well, it's got all these other tool suites that I can drive from here. Okay. Let's say my performance monitor. There we go. So there it is. I can look at all the performance that's going on, see how the system is being utilized. So it all starts though with the command itself. So becoming familiar with those commands, becoming familiar with what they're used for, and being able to drive the command line interface, very important for technicians to learn there. Okay. There are some of the commands that when you execute them, they just keep running until you tell them to stop. And the stop execution is this sequence right here, your control key plus the C key there. Um, there are some of the commands that will require administrative access. If you do a right click on your Windows Start menu, you remember we looked at the power menu there. There's a run as administrator function there. So now you have to know the administrator password in order to run those particular commands, or you have to be logged into the system as the systems administrator to have that additional access. Here are just a smattering of some of your commands. The directory command allows me to list files, folders, subfolders inside of on my disk drive. If I want to change directory, change to a different directory, I can use the change directory command and combinations of this period slash. Say I'm down 4 or 5 different directories deep. If I want to back up one directory at a time, excuse me, I type CD period backs me up one, CD period backs me up another. If I want to go to a particular directory, I do the change directory and give it the directory path or even the drive, the disk drive, and it will immediately relocate me to that drive. Okay. Here's some examples of that. Change directory, back to the user directory, change directory to the Windows. So now you see I'm prompted in the Windows environment there. So that allows me my navigation through my directory listing. And now I find it interesting now because in Windows, I actually call them folders, but the commands are directories. And the rest of the industry too, Linux, Unix, Mac, they call them directories. And we're starting to see, I've noticed even in some of Microsoft documentation, they're beginning to move away from the folder concept and more into that industry standard directory concept as well. Different commands here for moving files around, moving files, copy files. The robust copy allows me to copy large groups or folders, subfolders, everything. I can create directories with the make directory command. I can delete directories with the remove directory commands. And again, all of these are available in your command line interface with very good help text to show you how to use those as well. I would highly recommend that you guys just grab some time during the day and play around with that command line interface. Once again, on your search menu, type in command and you'll get an item that pops up there for your command interface. And look at the help text, navigate around through that. This is a format command. It erases all the data on a disk drive and allows me to reformat it. I can reformat it and assign the particular file management concept. Remember, Windows by default uses the NTFS, the New Technology File System. There is a disk partition. And when you type in disk part, then the prompt then changes to disk part, and it's an online disk management tool built in to the operating system as well. And I do all the same. I can, create directories, format the disk, partition the disk, whatever. This little command here, check disk, that is a scanning tool that will scan my disk for any bad sectors, bad, areas of the disk. And there's a couple of options there that will even allow me to attempt to repair or fix bad disk sectors. That's one of the things that I run on my two hard disk drives every morning as part of that automated process. The check disk command there. There's the shutdown. We looked at that, looked at the help text on that. The shutdown command and function there, it's the same as if I press the Windows power button. And I have all of these same options. I can shut the system down. I can put it into sleep or hibernate mode. I can shut it down and restart it. So there's my system file checker command. That allows me to reinstall, as it were, any system files that may have been corrupted or damaged or monkeyed with somewhere. So all of these commands here are available as part of your command line interface. You just need to become familiar with the how to use the command line interface, how to use the help text, um, and just get comfortable with the command itself or with many of the commands. Because I promise you, you're going to find yourself out and about in a field somewhere, supporting users where, for whatever reason, their system just simply won't boot up. So you're going to have to do very, serious system support things using the command line interface alone. So educate yourself on that. Let me go ahead and got a couple of links here that I want to share with you. Um, let's see. Do that. I want to do this. Yep. Let me grab this link right quick. Hang on. There's one I was telling you my student shared with me earlier. Um, there's actually two links that I'll share with you. One of those is it's a YouTube tutorial. But the other is there's the Windows Learn link that gives you your Windows Command online free tutorial. Okay, I'll share that link with you guys in the message box here. And the other is it's a YouTube. There he is. This guy right here. I like him. This old boy's got some pretty good videos here. He gets right into using the stuff, and he does a really good job, in my opinion, of telling you all about it there. So those links I shared with you there in the chat box. Educate yourself on Windows for sure. Make certain that you can drive the machine from the command line interface, because you will have to. I promise you. According to how long you stay in the support business. Okay. Now, configuring and setting up Windows in networking. We already talked about the different types of networks. There's wired networks, there's wireless networks, and for the most part, you find that these systems are typically now set up in a hybrid mode. You got a mix and match of each of those. We looked at some of the 802.3 is the wired systems, 802.11 is the wireless systems, and those are the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers designations and frameworks. But for the most part now, you're going to find that corporate networks of all sizes now are a hybrid of both of these. And smaller company networks, we're saying a lot of those are almost exclusively wireless as far as the end user workstations. Okay. So understanding where you go into your settings menu and configure the network connections here, you can actually go in and at the NIC, the network adapter level, and do some configuration on these things here. Now I will tell you the network interface cards that people are installing in computer systems nowadays, they're very intelligent, as is the Windows operating system, and they will pretty much auto configure based upon the system you plug them into. Now, I told you before, for all of the devices, hardware devices, software, etc., especially hardware appliances that I plug into my computer, I am in the habit of going to the original manufacturer and downloading things like their specific device drivers, things like that. Windows, for the most part, will automatically configure these devices and install a generic type of device driver. That does not always give me all the functionality that is supported by the device. So I will always go get the specific manufacturer's device drivers and install them. Now, I told you yesterday or 2 days ago when we were talking about networking, subnetting, that kind of thing. You can configure the IP configuration on a network system at the network interface card level. You can configure it statically, where you go in and you key all of the information in. And I'm talking about the IP address you select and assign to it, the subnet mask, the IP address of the gateway device, which is typically the router closest to you, the IP address of the DNS services, and those are oftentimes one and the same. Um, or you can have the DHCP server do it. That is by far my choice on that because it does it automatically and it manages the pool of available IP addresses without me having to worry about it. I can also do the thing I was telling you guys about IP reservation. If there are certain systems inside my network, like for instance, my web server or my print server or my router, gateway device, that I always want to have the same IP address, I can either choose to manually and statically configure those or turn that configuration over to the DHCP server and reserve the IP addresses in there that I want to always be assigned to those machines. And it matches them up with the MAC address. There's a table that DHCP maintains inside of the DHCP server. And it says, all right, anytime this particular device comes online, it presents its MAC address. It always gets this same IP address. And it also plays the role of removing that IP from the pool of other available IP addresses so that I don't have the situation of assigning the same IP address. Now, it's personal for me that I prefer that because of my learning disability. Dyslexia will drive a network engineer crazy, and I can make a mess of manually keying in all these IP addresses and setup functions. Okay. Now, Windows networking actually installs a couple of support functions anyway, automatically when you set up the network software and the network configuration. It will automatically set up and make available. Now, you have to configure it, of course, but it will automatically make available the capability of sharing printers and host machines and files and folders across the networks. It will automatically set up things such as for instance, we talked about the APIPA configuration, the automatic private IP addressing. And remember, those always start with 169.254. And remember also, the reason you get an APIPA address is because for whatever reason, your system could not make contact with the DHCP server. Okay. So I can either go into these systems and manually configure all of this, or I can turn over this configuration function to these things here, turn that configuration over to the DHCP server and let it do it automatically. Okay. Now, also in the properties panel for the NIC itself, you can go in and specifically set up individual and customize the items there, or you can and you should, in my opinion, to begin with anyway, accept the defaults because those defaults are set up to accommodate just about any kind of IP connectivity and addressability that you would ever encounter there. Here's another example. We looked at this the other day as well of a manual IP setting. The switch here is on. I have to key in the IP address. And in the modernized systems, rather than giving it the subnet mask 255.255.255.0, I just tell it what's my subnet prefix. And in this case, it's 24 bits of that 32-bit address. exactly the same as the Class C 255.255.255.0 subnet mask. We also give it the IP address of my gateway device, DNS devices, primary preferred DNS, and an alternate or secondary. Now, I told you before as well, the currently out on the public internet, IPv6 addressing is not supported. Now, a lot of companies are doing it internally in their autonomous networks. So they'll go ahead and even if you do an IPv6, I'm sorry, a IP configuration command, it will show you what the suggested IP version 6 address for your system would be already. And that's the hexadecimal display rather than the 192.168.2.46, whatever the decimal display might happen to be. You can set up network connections for publicly available network connections, private network connections, network connections that only communicate within your particular Windows network, your domain, they call it. And you can, if you wish, set up the, I mentioned a couple of times, the Windows Defender product. In previous versions of Windows, they used to separate the firewall, and then you had the Windows Defender, which also included your antivirus kit. Now they've sort of aggregated and merged those together, and I'll tell you that's another one of the areas that I've been quite impressed with Windows over the last three operating system versions. Anyway, they've sort of upped their game on the capabilities of the firewall, the antivirus kit, and in troubleshooting, in doing network type troubleshooting. Um, you go in and you decide, do you want to have your particular system, your host machine, and this is part of your network configuration. Do you want it discoverable by other systems on your network? Do you want it discoverable and be able to share appliances, printers, and folders and files across the network boundaries there? So that's all a network configuration thing that you go in and do when you're actually setting up those individual network components. Now, I want you to understand too, in IP networks, you will hear basically three terms that identifies different network segments, I guess is the best way to put it. You'll hear intranet, you'll hear internet, and you'll hear extranet. Intranet is typically defines a web server that has been set up to service only internal users in the network, applications or access in general, but it's only inside the network. The internet is typically what companies will set up their public-facing internet server, and that's their internet entry point for the outside world. And then there's another closed section. We call it, it's either referred to as an extranet, sometimes it's called the DMZ, demilitarized zone. And it's usually systems that are set up within the confines of firewalls, outward facing firewall, inward facing firewall. We've set those up in the past to allow like vendors and distributors and business partners that limited access into the network, usually set up on the network perimeter. And they don't have any further access into the rest of the network. People that are coming in through that same pipe, they're routed around. If they don't have the access to those extranet functions and features, they're routed around that and then gain access to the network. But it does that blocking inbound and outbound. People that are normal employees that work with the rest of the network, they don't have any access from inside the network to that DMZ either. Okay. The Windows Defender and the firewall work really well. It's set up pretty much on the same premise as other firewalls, other modernized firewalls. They call it implicit deny or whitelisting. And it uses what's called access control list, filters, rules, whatever you want to call it, that either block or limit certain types of access into particular areas of the system. And unless I explicitly allow some type of inbound communication with some of these filters, then it's blocked by default. Implicit deny, they call it. So, and that's how the Windows Defender firewall is set up in the private portion of your network there. And it allows, your application, you can do it at the application level, your account, your applications, your system in general. You can either allow it or disallow it communication based upon these further defined rules to private portion of the network, public network, discoverability, things like that. You define all of that in your Windows firewall setup. Okay. Now, we've talked already a couple of times about virtual private networks. There are all types of commercial client products that are out there and available. I've been experimenting with this Norton Utilities. Norton and Lifeline sort of joined forces there, or LifeLock, not Lifeline, LifeLock. And theirs is a cloud-based system, and it includes the Norton Utilities, the LifeLock functionality, and a pretty nice VPN. Not completely sold on it as of yet. I've been using this guy here, ExpressVPN, for several years. For the longest time, I used the free version, and then I noticed there were some things that were lacking there. So I like the new version of it. It's very tight, very inexpensive. And that's just a couple. I mean, there are dozens of virtual private network clients out there. I've also been experimenting now with the new server HTML code, HTML5, which actually pushes a VPN connection down to anybody that visits the website, whether they have a VPN client or not. So VPN, absolutely the way to go, in my opinion. The most secure browsing you can do out on the public internet today. So I would certainly recommend it, especially if you're going to be connecting to any public networks, hotel networks, airline networks, those kind of things, coffee shop networks. Fire up a VPN. There are lots of now, and we're seeing more and more of them, these wireless wide area networks. My son and my nephew both now are using their new 5G hotspot, and that's their in-home internet connectivity. We're seeing several different implementations of those things, and many of those also are including these virtual private network clients along with their packages too. The virtual private networks allow you to utilize, and it's selectable. You choose which one you want. They're showing that right here. There's these what they call tunneling protocols, and it's literally like drilling a tunnel through the internet. Imagine, if you will, the internet is a big old granite wall, and when you fire your client, your web browser up with these VPNs using the tunneling protocols, first thing it does, the tiniest little diamond-headed drill you could imagine, 5 micron diameter. It drills a tunnel through that granite wall, which is the internet. And then you layer some encryption around that. And then the tunneling protocols, like having 3 wrappers of protection around your connection over the public internet. And I'll tell you, currently, the public internet, the most unsecure network ever, ever. The virtual private network with the tunneling protocol connections is unbelievably secure. There's several of them. There's ones called point-to-point tunneling protocol. There's secure socket tunneling protocol. There's layer 2 or level 2 tunneling protocol. So it is really, really secure type of environment. You configure that as part of your virtual private network connection. And in the mostly for your cellular networks, all the cellular providers now saying, oh, you get unlimited everything. Except for your digital data. And it is unlimited. So you still communicate, but what they do, I mentioned the other day, they call it throttling. You'll get full network speed for up to, I don't know, 2 gigabits, 3 gigabits, 10 gigabits of data. And after that, you still can communicate, but it throttles the speed back. Okay. So it is still unlimited, but unlimited with conditions there. Proxy servers and services, we talked about these in passing the other day as well. Most of your proxies, whether it's a forward or reverse inbound, outbound proxy, utilizes port 8080. It's a very common port that the proxy data goes in and out of. You can think of proxy as sort of a store and forward situation. A proxy server actually acts on behalf of or as a proxy for an individual user. And conceptually, think about setting up rules that will allow me to deny a child, for instance, from visiting a certain website. Okay, so they hit the proxy first. The proxy says, all right, this is a website that is not that's denied to you, Mr. Kid user. So it just bumps that back and says, sorry, you don't have authority to visit that website, kind of thing. That's the concept of a proxy. Okay. Now, proxy servers also give me the ability of basically sort of throttling back and saving or more efficiently managing, as it were, network bandwidth because it sort of stores up network connections, and then when it finds a good solid network or a network data, and when it finds a good usable open network connection, then it'll blow it on down the pipe. So that's another utilization of proxies there. Okay. All right, folks on the YouTube channel, you guys hang with us. We're about to let the students here do a quiz program or a quiz session here, lesson quiz. What they'll do is it there? Nope, that's not it. Is it there? Boy, I got so many windows open here. I have to, there we go. You guys boogie on over here. I'm wondering if this is going to make me log in again. I bet it does. But I want you guys to move on over here. Okay, come on. Yep, thought so. I was up early this morning and browsing through a whole bunch of stuff, and I went ahead and logged onto this first thing. I mean, early in the morning. Well, I see now it's sort of timed out on me there. For the YouTube users, what we do at the end of each lesson, the students will go through a quiz. They will go through and answer the quiz questions, and then they will post the scores on the chat box for themselves and the rest of the student body to see. We also find that if we repeat those lesson quizzes, that their scores tend to improve over a period of time. So that's pretty much the process that we go through in all of our classes. Now, Kaylee and Alex, you guys did quite well, as you saw on the quizzes that you did yesterday. So I'm not going to ask you to repeat those. And Kaylee, you made a very good point on the scoring on those. I find that students that are familiar with the subject matter out of the gate, they always do better on those. But I also find that over a period of days, even on the subjects and the material that students may not be as familiar with, they tend to up those scores as well, especially every time they repeat it. Okay. So I want you guys to do that. And I'll tell you, we'll go ahead and take a quick break here too. I'm going to set your timer up here for 20 minutes. You folks on the YouTube channel there, just hang with us. We will be back shortly right after this quiz and latrine break. And then we will kick right back on in on some more lecture. So stay with us. We shall return almost immediately. All right, folks, welcome back. Let's get ready to re-engage here. Well done on those quizzes, by the way, both of you. And always remember, repeating those things will up the scores and will drive that information into your long-term memory. So do that absolutely. Okay. Now, this particular lesson sort of goes a bit further and reiterates some of the stuff we covered in the last couple of lessons. So you'll see what I'm talking about. But it also introduces some new concepts here as far as doing troubleshooting and supporting Windows specifically as it relates to network environment. Now we talked quite a bit a couple of days ago about the IP configuration, as well as the IP config command. Now, this is the command here, IP config. On your command line interface, you can jump in there and do the IP config blank space / question mark, and it will give you the help text specifically for that command. That command will either display for me what my current IP configuration is, and that gives me things like what my IP address is, what my subnet mask is. It shows me both my IP version 4 IP address presentation as well as the IP version 6 address, and that'll be in hexadecimal, by the way. It shows me things specifically about how my particular session is configured. I can use that again either to display the information, including some information as it relates to the domain name services DNS data, or I can use it to request and renew my IP address. So there's lots of functions that one command will allow me to perform. Here's sort of what it looks like here. If you were to run the IP config command with the all parameter, it shows me, here is my the specific it tells me about my network adapter, my NIC. There's the MAC address, physical address. Remember, that never changes. It will ask me, or it will tell me whether it is DHCP configured, meaning that it's a automatic type of configuration. It tells me there is my IP version 6 local address, link local address, they call it. There is my IP version 4 address, the subnet mask, the address of the gateway device, which again is usually the router that's closest to me. And I can run this with the IP config command itself right on my screen. Now, I was telling you earlier, if you guys ran somebody again says, "Hey, I can't connect to the internet, or I can't talk to anybody in my network." If you run this command and this IP address right here is something along the lines of 169.254.18.20, whatever, well, that is the APIPA address. That is the address that tells you that for some reason this computer here cannot make contact with its router. It can't get to the DHCP component to get its IP address upgraded. Okay. There are several other commands that you will encounter here that you can utilize to test connectivity. You guys are probably familiar with the ping command. The ping command is just a means of trying to basically bounce a connection request off of a target system somewhere. The ping command just send by default, Windows sends a 4 different data packets that are 32 bytes each, and it just tries to bounce them off of whatever fully qualified computer name or IP address you have identified in the ping. And on that system, there's another protocol, software protocol, called ICMP, Internet Connect Message Protocol. And its purpose in life is to echo that ping back to you. And it will do that. If you can reach that target system, it will bounce those 4 packets back to you and give you a time, typically in milliseconds, as to what the round trip took, how long it took there in milliseconds. If you cannot make contact with that system for whatever reason, then the ping will fail and you'll get typically timed out messages on the ping. Now, the ping does not tell you what the problem is, but it will tell you that for some reason you cannot reach that target system. What you have to understand is that target system is not just a direct connect between your host machine and whatever system you're trying to ping. It probably that has to go through multiple hops, and each of those hops is a router. But the ping doesn't tell you that. All it tells you is you cannot make contact with that target system. And the information comes back much in this format here. Okay. This case, all of these, the ping was successful all the way across the board. All four of those 32-byte data frames were able to hit that machine and were echoed back by the ICMP protocol. Okay. If for some reason one of those is not successful, it will give you this information here. Okay, nope, couldn't reach the host, or the request timed out. Now that timed out message here is a little bit different. That may have been something, one of the hops along the way. There were too many hops, and it exceeded what's called the time to live TTL function here, which tells me, well, I'll allow you to go through 11 routers before it drops the package off the network and times out. I didn't, it didn't make the trip. But this guy here just says, nope, there's something about that host you can't reach. And all four of them came back telling me that, nope, there's something wrong there. So then you would want to do further investigation. Now, there is a command, this guy here, called traceroute. Oh, and by the way, the ping command is the same command in Windows as it is in most other operating systems as well. One major difference, for instance, between Windows and Linux. Linux will just keep on pinging until you tell it stop. Windows, by default, just sends the 4 data packets there. I can have Windows continually ping if I wish. That's a T switch, I believe it is, on the ping command. The traceroute command, for instance, as opposed to the ping, it gives me back information about each hop along the way. And remember, each of those hops is a router. So the display of that looks much like this. Okay. It will tell me either the fully qualified domain name and or the IP address of each of these hops. Okay. And you see here, this one says request timed out. That means that the initial router that it tried to route that request to on the backside of this particular IP it didn't respond, or it was offline or something. So the router changed paths, and it says, okay, we'll go a different path here. So it was then able to trace all the way to this case to the Google DNS servers, that's the 4.8s there is the DNS servers in Google. But it tells you again the generalized, this is not an exact timing, but the generalized millisecond timing that it took for each of these hops to occur. TRACERT is a command in Windows. The full words trace route, same command, but in the Linux environments there as well. The path ping command is sort of a combination between traceroute and ping together. Gives me a little bit more detail. It'll give me a more accurate latency time between hops in milliseconds there as well. There's a couple of things I can do. This is more along the lines of DNS, the domain name services, that I can do to look at connections and their fully qualified names. I can get information about whether is it an IPv4, an IPv6, is it a mail exchange server, is it a what's the information that comes out of the DNS server that fully defines what that computer system out there in the wild happens to be. Gave you the different record types the other day. I can use the NS lookup command on my command line interface to pull back additional bits of information out of the DNS server. DNS servers are typically on board inside autonomous network servers. And then there's also those that are spread out all over the public internet as well. Google's DNS server being one of those. So according to the type of record that is stored on that server, the NS lookup command, this here says I'm looking up, and the type is a mail exchange server, and I want you to give me the information on this qualified domain name, CompTIA.org. And the information I'm getting it from here is the Google DNS server. So it comes back and tells me the information there. And this is the primary and the secondary DNS servers inside of CompTIA A, N1 and N2 servers there. The NS lookup command also is much more powerful. I can use it for instance, for making a copy of the DNS database and pull it in secondary, put it on a secondary server. So NS lookup is sort of a query into the DNS server. Okay. The counterpart on this in Linux environments, Unix, Linux, and macOS environment is a command called dig, D-I-G. Alex, you have a question there? Nope. Okay. All right. Yeah, sorry, your mic went hot there for a second. So the netstat command is one that allows me to look at the network status on my own computer system. It will actually show me how my individual communication ports on my system are configured. Do I have an active session? Is it actively listening for an inbound communication request? And if so, what port number is it listening on? So the netstat command, again, shows me what my port configuration is. And I want you guys to remember, too, on all of your computer processes, there are 65,535 logical communication ports that I can address. The netstat command will show me what the configurations of those are. If they're open, if they're closed, if they're listening, if there's an active session, things like that. Okay. So those are but a few of the commands that I can utilize to look at my network functionality, my IP stack, how my IP addresses, IPv4, IPv6, how my DNS system is configured and set up. Okay. So again, it gives me tools that I can use at a command line interface to troubleshoot networking problems that I may encounter inside my home network. Now, I've mentioned a couple of times along the way as well different tools that are available. Some of them baked right into the operating system, and then some of those are either add-on applications or external third-party tools that I can utilize for remotely attaching to a target system, mainly for doing supports, what I would do it for. There is a couple of tool suites that are built right into the Windows operating environment. There's one called RDP, Remote Desktop Protocol, this guy right here. It operates on port 3389 by default. It will allow me to set up a very secure communication environment, and in essence, it allows me to log on and take control of a target system. When I take control of that system, it displays a screen for me. It looks much like this. Okay. So inside of this window on the right-hand side here is the user's desktop. Now, if I'm going to log into their desktop over this connection, of course, I have to have their credentials. The thing I like about it, too, is over on the left-hand side here, I can maintain an interactive chat with that user while I'm actually driving their computer system. RDP it's a situation where you have to be invited, if you will, to connect to that target system. So, and it's actually a client server kind of setup. But if you have a Windows professional license or above, this comes as part of the operating system. Okay. So, and basically what you have to know the IP address or the fully qualified domain name of the target system you're going to be connecting to. And of course, like I say, you have to have their login credentials, user ID, and password if you're going to log in and take control of that system. There's several other tools out here like this. I use one called TeamViewer. You guys may be familiar with TeamViewer. I have a brother that lives out in south of Phoenix, Arizona, and let's just say that he is not technically apt. So pretty often, as a matter of fact, I'll dial his system up, take control of it, And the way he puts it is fix whatever he unfixed. And the cool thing with that package as well is it has we can do real-time video conferencing while I am logged in and controlling his system. The RDP server, as I was saying, is only available on the professional and enterprise level licenses for Windows. There are other systems that I can utilize. I mean, other types of connectivity I can utilize to attach to target systems. The Team Viewer is one of them. I used to use a tool. You guys, I think I mentioned it the other day. PC Anywhere was a tool I used to use quite a bit in order to attach and support target systems there. Again, the RDP, you have to be invited to basically log in and take control of that system. And it does it in a very secure mode in that it dynamically generates what would be considered a encryption key or an access key, and then exchanges it, and it selects that connectivity, the reach back connectivity, as it were, on what they call these ephemeral ports, and it just randomly selects these from the port range from 49,152 and above. The thing about the RDP is because it is a Microsoft resident package, well, it plays in the sandbox quite well if you have a firewall, Microsoft firewall configured. So you don't have to specifically give, rules and allowances to be able to attach to those target systems. But when I have the user's desktop in my window, it's same as if I'm sitting there at their keyboard logged into the machine. Right? Have complete control. But again, I have to have proper credentials. Okay. Windows RM there, remote type of remote communication. It it allows me to attach to the system and exchange all type of information, management console stuff. I can run PowerShell commands or PowerShell scripts on the system. I can initiate this remote connectivity with a PowerShell command and control it with a PowerShell script. All types of remote management commands and functions that I can implement with that. Now, this guy here, I told you the other day about a client program called PuTTY. This is also another remote connectivity method. It gives you command line access. Okay. Now, Secure Shell operates on port 22 by default. It is not a native Windows protocol at all. It's been around in Linux, Unix, primarily in Linux for years. But in order to implement it on Windows-based machines, you have to have some kind of client program. Now, this is an example screen of like a PuTTY screen. It dynamically generates a key, a digital signature, as it were, to identify the system and exchanges that over the RSA link. Okay. And then you have command line interface. So I'm not RSA, the Secure Shell link. I mentioned earlier in the week talking about FTP. File transfer protocol is not secure. Even if you're required to log into an FTP server, that doesn't guarantee that the data transfer is encrypted or secure. Most times it's not. But if I establish a secure shell connection, there are then secure shell FTP commands that I can run over that connection, and everything is encrypted, highly encrypted. Okay. There are additional sets, and this is part of the Windows Remote Management Tool Suite called RMM, Remote Monitoring and Management. It is primarily a command layer kind of tool suite, but it also ties in real nicely. I mentioned several times already companies that are setting up these enterprise mobility management systems. That includes the mobile application management, mobile device management, the unified messaging. Well, the RMM kits interface real nicely with that. And it's part of an overall sort of a higher level, not really specific software, but more of a framework, if you will. This thing called EDR, endpoint detection and response. It is there is an EDR tool, but it lives inside this larger tool suite that allows me to real time monitor remote systems and pull that information back, pull status information back to my remote monitoring software. And it gives me the same sort of status, conceptually anyway, the same sort of status updates that I get with my simple network management protocol locally. Okay. So um, this, you like, if you didn't have enough acronyms already, here's a couple more for you. SPICE, they call it. Simple Protocol for Independent Computing Environments. It doesn't give me so much real-time management capability, but it does give me some monitoring capability of remote systems, monitoring systems that are either remote into part of my network or and it actually creates we talked about the virtual machines the other day. It actually gives me the ability to remotely monitor and interact directly with virtual machines. Okay. Now, I also talked about the different layers of encryption algorithms. TLS, or transport layer security, is yet another of those encapsulated wrappers that I've spoken about a couple of times already. The tunneling protocols or wrappers, the triple wrappers around the connectivity. Um, TLS is a means, and if you look at all of your newer digital certificates, the older original versions of the digital certificates just utilize what they call secure socket layers, SSL. For instance, if I am setting up a digital certificate for a website, rather than using port 80, which is the HTTP protocol default port, will it use the HTTP secure protocol on port 443? That's the secure socket. So that's how the digital certificates were originally set up. The latest version of those now, and I guess it's version 3.1 or something like that. Now you'll see they are noted as SSL/TLS. So not only does it use that secure communication port socket, but it also incorporates things like tunneling protocols and encryption algorithms to give you the transport layer security. So it encapsulates everything in the data payload of all the frames that are sent back and forth. Another thing that the SPICE here actually incorporates, I've mentioned a couple of times already, the AAA compliant services that provide that authentication, authorization, and accounting functions. In the Windows environment, primarily in a Windows domain environment, it utilizes a AAA compliant service known as Kerberos, Kerberos with a K. And it's referred to as a ticket granting ticketing system. So when you go to log in initially to a Windows domain environment, you basically present your credentials to, it's an entity inside of that called the Key Distribution Center, KDC. And it says, all right, we validated your credentials, your ticket has been punched, you are cleared to come through and log into the network. Now, by default, the Kerberos environment then is set up so that any of the other subsystems inside of that network that you have just been validated to, and think about content management systems, email system, database engines, web services, whatever. Well, by default, if you needed to access any of those, you would have to take your ticket back to the KDC and get your ticket punched to have access to those subsystems. Now, they can set it up for doing basically a single sign-on kind of functionality where the system would validate the credentials once and then pass that validation around to the other subsystems. But it can be set up either way. There's a whole host of other remote, not necessarily remote control tools, but for instance, there's remote viewing tools, screen sharing. There's a function called Virtual Network Client, VNC. Of course, we talked about the virtual private network using the tunneling protocols. And then, things like sharing of files and folders and transmitting files like FTP. Apple uses, you guys certainly are familiar with AirDrop, basically close proximity sharing of files and so on. I also have those same type of tool suites that are available in all of the other operating environments as well, Linux, Android, Windows, all of those. There's a whole crowd as well of audio and video sharing tools, like SharePoint is one. What we're using here, Zoom. So there's a whole bunch of those that give me that ability to not only monitor remote systems, but to interact with them dynamically. And even in some cases, if I have the proper credentials, taking complete control of those target systems. Okay. Now, there's a whole host on board as well as far as Microsoft is concerned as well of tools that allow me to do real-time troubleshooting and performance monitoring of the target systems. And these are, just some of the things, some of the access that I can have with these tools. I can look at there on your computer. There's a screen called System Screen, and it gives me information about, for instance, how the system is configured, the type of CPU I'm running, how many cores. Some entities refer to this as the banner page of your computer system. Tells you what the configuration of the system is, how much main memory does it have, what kind of operating system version of the operating system it's running, hardware configurations. Is it set up, and if so, what are the network connectivity? What's the status on the network? Things like that. That's all information that I can get from the GUI, the system panel. But there's also this command here, msinfo exec, that will display all that information for me as well. You can run that command from any command line interface, and it will display all those environment variables for you, much in this format right here. Okay. There's the operating system name, the versioning of it here. You've got information, for instance, about the processor. There's the processor information. Tells you about that speed that it runs in, things like that. Even the system name, the manufacturer of it, what your primary directory structure looks like down at the bottom. And that's all your system information or your banner page information that's displayed and available for every computer system in a network. I have this. This is I'm going to tell you, there's two applets, management applets that work very closely together, and they give you a before or a past, present, and future view of what's going on with your computer system. Okay. The event viewer shows me all events that are occurring on the system right now. It's actually 5 different files that are loaded up from different areas of the system application entries, your software system setup entries, your security type of messages that come in here, and any events that are forwarded by other applications or other systems will roll up in this as well. So, but it shows me things that have occurred in the past. Well, that along with the task manager will show me, for instance, things that are running right now and things that I have set up to run in the future. So the two of those applets together give me that past, present, and future look into my system in general. Now, this guy will show me messages, warning messages, critical messages. You'll find with just a cursory look in the event files that probably 75–80% of the messages that show up here are informational. From a security aspect, they don't have any security value whatsoever. When you start looking at the error and the critical messages that show up here, that's the ones you really want to pay attention to. Here is the event viewer management console entry itself. And with these commands here, you don't have to include the .msc or the .exe on any of those. Just run the command and it will show the information. I can also dynamically display that task manager in a couple of ways. One way is down on the task bar. If you do a right click on the task bar, one of the options there is display the task manager. or you can hold down the control shift and escape key and it will display the task manager for you, or you can do control alt delete and one of the options there is display the task manager. But this is what it looks like. It displays all the tasks that are running. You have different tabs up at the top here, which will show you different bits of information. I can look at all processes and tasks that are associated with specific users. The startup tab here, we didn't have the startup tab in previous versions of Windows. It was a completely different application. But this guy shows me tasks that I've got to run in the future. So again, the task manager, the event viewer together give me that past, present, and future look at what's going on in my system. The event viewer is basically a roll up of the system logs that tell me what happened in the past. The task manager is the things that are running right now and ones that I have scheduled to run in the future. One of the things that I can look at on the task manager is this performance monitor. And it tells me for each and every, well, I can break it down further. We'll show that in just a moment, but it tells me here what the four major components in my computer, what the utilization of those are. Now, if all of a sudden I'm getting, my system just starts crawling along, I can look here and even get down and identify it to a specific process and how much CPU time, random access memory, network bandwidth, and disk access that individual process is taking up. And it does it on a slowly moving time frame here. The graph does. It'll slowly shift as the time goes along here. Okay. So I can look at that panel. I also can look at, again, the processes, tie them back to the user that's running those. And it will show me that those four major system resources that are being used up and the percentages are being allocated to each individual process run by a specific user. Okay. Now, I've mentioned to you a couple of times about the processors, multi-core processors, and the speed is very important. The fact that the multi-core processors will support this multi-threading or hyper-threading, they call it, allows the processor to initiate and control many, many different software threads or programs simultaneously. I'm thinking, let's see what I've got running there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I have 9 programs, individual programs that are running, well, with the other two, but networking, I have 11 programs that are running real time on my computer right now. And I mean, you guys look at your system, you probably got a handful running as well. Sometimes, according to the application that you're running on the system, we mentioned this the other day as well, the graphics processor unit, GPU. Sometimes it's called an advanced graphics processor, AGP, but same thing. It's a dedicated chip or CPU helper, as it were, that is dedicated for doing those massive algebraic computations that are required to manipulate graphics. We find that workstations that are designed to do, heavy duty involved, especially 3D graphics manipulation real time, they will more often than not have that additional graphics processor unit. Sometimes it's an expansion card. We looked at the AGP expansion card earlier in the week. Sometimes it's just another chipset on the motherboard sits right along beside the central processor unit. Okay. I can, with my performance monitor tool, look at how my memory is being used, what process and what percentage of memory is being used by each and every processes. And it's very, very important now, and especially your modern motherboards, man, you can sock these things just cram packed full of random access memory. And the more memory you have and the more higher speed multi-core processors you have, well, the faster your system is going to run. And I mean, full stop there. Okay. Now, in the old days, back when I was a young whippersnapper, memory was gauged back when I first started computers. It was gauged in kilobytes or thousands of bytes. Now we're talking gigabytes and terabytes, billions and trillions of storage locations. Um, in the old days, even as 30 years ago, we had to actively manage in the Windows environment what was called paging or swapping, because we had a limited amount of random access memory. It would fill up. We'd run, like heavy duty graphics manipulation programs, and memory would start to fill up. So we set aside space on our primary disk drive called virtual memory. So if main memory starts filling up, the system was directed to take a chunk of main memory, and they called it pages, a page or multiple pages, and temporarily write it out to the disk drive, freeing up that memory to do other things. And then when I needed that swap or that page file, I'd grab it from the virtual memory, put it back in memory, and execute it. Okay. And we used to manage that ourselves. And you still can, but there's just no need for it anymore. Windows does a much better, more efficient job of managing that than we human critters do. Okay. I also need to constantly monitor, and this is part of my performance monitoring tool suite as well, the disk utilization and my network bandwidth utilization on the system. Um, this is your task manager, and when I go to look at the individual performance, notice the users tab up here is selected, and down underneath individual users, it shows all of the processes that are being run by those users, as well as the utilization here. And again, it's either the CPU time slice, main memory percentage time slice, the disk drive, and the network time slice that's being utilized by each individual process that's being run, in this case, by the user named James. Okay. And so that's what I can use that performance monitoring detail, the task manager detail tab there, to see who's using up all my system resources, right? So in addition, if we go back here and look at the startup tab, this guy right here, if I select that, it shows me any and all tasks that I have set to launch in the future. Some of those services, processes, programs, I have them set to start up and run in the background, just for supporting system functions and so on. And I go into the task manager at the startup tab, or in the services tab in this case, and look at all of the services that are running. I can also tie back some of these to the startup tab over here, because it shows me that it's restarted every time you boot the machine up. Okay. So, but this shows me what's the status. Is it stopped? Is it running? Okay. There's a couple of other status modes there that it shows. Waiting, I think, is one of those. But each and every one of these allows me to track all of the services that are automatically run by the system. And most of those are started up when the system boots up. Some of them have limited function that they perform. So they'll start up when the system boots, they'll do their thing, and then they'll stop. And when they stop, of course, it frees up any system resources that they may have been using. Okay. So the startup program here, the startup tab, shows me that. And then the services tab shows me right now what's going on with the systems there. Okay. There's a performance monitor and the resource monitor. It gives me, the task manager allows me to manage tasks that are occurring right now on the system and those that are set to run in the future with the startup tab. Well, the resource monitor gives me extended information over and above what the task manager is capable of showing me. And that, along on the performance monitor, this is what this guy looks like here. There's your resource monitor. And it also gives me the percentages of utilization on the physical memory, RAM, the main memory. It gives me CPU time slice. It shows me the disk and the network utilization here by going into these tabs. And it again, it gives me that utilization over a slowly moving timeline. So, if you go in here to the resource or even the performance monitor and you see these things are just spiked off the chart, well, track it down to a particular resource or um, a, uh, a tool, a background service or a process or a programmer, and then you'll see what's taken up all of the system resources. And if you've got them where it's 99% of everything across the board, that may very well be some kind of malware running rampant on your system and using up all of your system resources. Okay. And again, it's the four major ones: the CPU, central processor unit time slice, percentage of main memory, disk utilization, and network bandwidth is the main four that you'll monitor. This is what your performance monitor looks like real time here. Okay. Actually, I think maybe this is the Windows 10 version, and well, it sort of looks the same on both of them, but I believe that's the Windows 10 view of it there. But it shows you again the CPU, memory, disk, and network bandwidth utilization there. And it gives you that over that slow moving graph image over a timeline. And you can tie that back. Each of the processes that are running, let me go back a couple of pages here and I'll show you this. Notice this right here, that PID, that is a process identifier. Okay. That process identifier can be utilized to trace this process or service back to an individual system service or user that's running it. So that PID is important as far as being able to track that. Sort of ties it all together there back to the original user that is running the process. Okay. Performance monitoring, again, it's typically percentages of CPU utilization, percentages of main memory, percentages of a network bandwidth, and disk utilization. You can color code the graphs here, and then that color coding is, it gives you a visual of saying, okay, well that green color coding there, that's page faults, that's read write errors to and from my virtual memory. Okay. So I've got something that's overlaying in main memory, usually in the same address space, that kind of thing. So there is also a command, PERFMON, that will run this for you from any command line interface too. So you have all of those management consoles and management applet programs that will allow you to real-time monitor what all is going on with your system. Okay. Now, the msconfig command is one that allows me to basically set up and control how my machine is going to boot up. I can tell it things in the system configuration panel where I'm going to boot from. Do I want to load up this driver or that driver or start these startup processes, things like that. The msconfig command also is a heavy duty configuration tool that I can use to troubleshoot certain things. Give you an example. I make my own wines, and lots of them I make with wild growing grapes. A friend that we had, and Mr. Bill's passed away now. I miss him dearly, but he had these two beautiful muscadine grapevines, and he used to let me get all the grapes I wanted every year to make my muscadine wine. And for that, I would keep his wife, Miss Bobby's computer up and running. She calls me one evening all freaked out, and they were both elderly. I mean, more elderly than me. Her computer's locking up. She's getting all these messages on the system that warning about this and that, and click this link and we'll scan the computer. So she was just digging deeper and deeper. It occurred originally, one of her church friends had sent her an email, or it looked like it came from one of her church friends anyway, and it may very well have. But she clicked on a link, it downloaded some malware, starts digging down in her system, and it got down into the boot sector of the machine. It's called a boot sector virus, and it's actually a worm, but but same thing. It dug down and just locked the system up. So I was at the point to where, because I'd never seen this particular malware before, and I was at the point to where I told her, I says, the best thing we can do here is just strip this thing down, erase everything down to the bare metal, and reload everything. Well, she got quite upset because she had a whole bunch. She said thousands in her mind of videos and pictures and phone calls and stuff like that from her children, grandchildren, and great grandchildren. She didn't have any backups of. So I commissioned a whole bunch of my hacker attacker buddies, and we finally figured out the approach was going to be to use the MS config command. And because you can strip it down to where just the bare necessities load up when you boot the machine. So we did. We just stripped it down to where all we had was the bare minimum drivers and everything. And first, it was just bringing it up into the system setup menu. And did some looking around there and slowly started turning on system processes and services, and finally located the first of what ended up being four system files that had been corrupted. It was a process they call shimming, to where the bad guys were embedding some malware into some of the system files. So we finally located those, restored the original versions, and finally, after about 3 days and probably a dozen or more reboots and reconfigs with the MS config command, we finally got it up to where we could run our antivirus anti-malware package on it, do a deep dive clean and that kind of thing. And we saved all of her um, uh, videos, images, sound files, things like that. And of course, set her up where she was automatically backing that stuff up. So the system config utility is driven by that MS config command. And it allows me to do that specific configuration of the system itself, and telling it the what, where, when, why, how, and who of booting the machine up. Okay. Now, as an A plus technician, not only are you going to be handling lots of oftentimes self-inflicted wounds from the hardware perspective, and we talked about several of those yesterday, you are also going to be charged with troubleshooting a whole bunch of software problems. Okay. Now, we talked about the first of the week, the BIOS and the UEFI. BIOS is your basic input output system. The later versions of it is a unified extensible firmware interface. Each of those goes through pretty much the same kind of steps when the system boots up. They both send the machine through that power on self test, the post operation, and it checks each and every component of the system, basically sends that query that I talked about earlier in the week. Are you there and are you healthy? Starts with the power supply and then moves on to the other components. The UEFI has a boot manager type of program that it utilizes, and then it sets up the basic load of the system utilities. Then it loads up what they call the kernel code of the operating system that usually comes off of the firmware chip, and then tells where the OS is located on this, loads that up, goes through and loads up your system support files and features. Windows has they call it DLLs, dynamic link libraries. So it loads all of those up. Whatever user configuration has been put on the system, it fires it all up, and then the user gets their login screen and they go on their happy way. You can set up, of course, and we looked at some of that in the setup menus earlier. You can set up all of your system startup functionality they call it the Windows repair environment, Windows RE. That's where we interrupt the boot process and go into the Windows RE setup. Here's what it looks like. I tell it where to boot the machine from. I can boot from an external device, USB flash drive, or a DVD, or even a network boot. There's a network boot environment called PXE, pre-execution environment. So I can, do recovery functions there from the boot recovery menu. I can go into my system resources screen and do all sorts of uh, under the covers level troubleshooting kind of things. Here's where I can go up in this recovery environment and set up my, how I want the system to start up, how I want it to boot up. Do I want to boot up in, with bare minimum drivers loaded in safe mode, and then I can do further troubleshooting, that kind of thing. Um, so I decide how I want the system to be set up. I can also, in the Windows recovery environment, we talked about this earlier in the week as well. I can attempt to have the recovery environment diagnose and fix anything that is, not allowing Windows to completely start up. You'll notice here, I get the command prompt. Okay. If I wish, I can go and do a system restore. And I have the choice. I can restore the system programs and keep my user programs, or I just wipe the whole thing clean and reload everything from the ground up. Okay. So I've got quite a bit of latitude and leeway on how I can use the boot recovery, the Windows recovery environment tools, um, and configure the system. I also can, like I was doing in Miss Bobby's situation, strip this sucker down to the bare minimum and start slowly but surely adding on system functions to see if any of my system files or system dynamic link libraries have been corrupted. Now, nowadays, in most of your modernized systems, we talked about the Trusted Platform Module, TPM, earlier in the week. Now, Miss Bobby's system was prior to the whole TPM thing coming about, so it wasn't implemented. So that's where that shimming of those system files was made possible, because TPM wasn't doing the secure check digital signatures on each and every system file back then. Okay. Now you could set it up to do just that. Okay. There's also certain things when we load up an operating system in a Windows environment, you can set up to have the system automatically create these checkpoints. And it's just a point in time storage, if you will, or copy of what the system configuration is at that point in time. And I can use those checkpoints to roll the system back to a certain date and time. So if I can identify when the system became corrupt, and I can do that in a number of ways. I can do it by doing, checking the file system and digital signatures associated with files. And if I had system files that, as of this date, they were changed, the date stamp changed, the size changed, and those are system files that shouldn't change. Well, if I can successfully get to the recovery environment and roll back to the point previous to that restore point, well, it negates all of that stuff going forward. I've done that in the past when we actually were able to determine when a system was infected with malware. Well, we rolled it back to a restore point prior to that time. It erased the malware. Okay. So you decide how the system is going to be restored. You decide if you want to just, again, erase it down to the bare metal and reload everything. Or you can tell it to restore just the operating system environment and leave your data files. And then in some of the restore software, it'll do it the other way around. Restore all my data files and leave the operating system how it is. You see. So, but when you install the operating system originally, you decide what those checkpoints are going to be, those restore points are. And those are very valuable as far as being able to set the system back to a date and time when before you had some type of infection there. You know, there's other things as far as setting up the level of protection on the system, the level of restore point, the level of data that you're going to be putting in those checkpoints. Okay. And here again, you decide how you want the system restored. Okay. This is a rollback kind of a restore here. Select this option to undo the most recent update, driver, or software installation if you think that's what's causing the problem. Okay. I've had to do this on a couple of computer systems to roll back to a particular restore point. We had to do it on my wife's Apple iPhone. I'm not an iOS guy. I mean, I can navigate through it, but certainly aren't any specialist on it. One of the updates, and this was before we changed their evil ways, the wife had on her Apple iPhone. It automatically downloaded, automatically updated, locked that sucker up. So, and I couldn't do anything with it. I mean, I couldn't even turn the thing on, you know. And originally we couldn't turn it off, but we got the key sequence to make it power down, but it wouldn't restart. So we ended up having to take it to the Apple store and let the young whippersnapper Apple guy fix it up. Device drivers, same thing. You can go into the programs and features applet program. We looked at this yesterday, as a matter of fact, and roll back to a specific driver point, roll back a particular piece of software. And these are the checkpoint things I was talking about. And this is usually device drivers, security updates, application updates, operating system updates, things like that. Um, it will keep these updates on board for me, and I decide what that configuration is going to be when I set the machine up. How many updates deep is it going to keep for me? And then I can roll these suckers back. I can roll back to, uninstall this update, uninstall that update, uninstall this driver update, and just basically roll it back to a point in time that I have determined when the error started occurring. I love the way now that when you're going into device drivers in the programs and features arena, it says, all right, well, why are you rolling this back? You know, well, it doesn't work anymore. That's why I'm rolling it back. And please do take the time necessary to fill out these queries. That truly does help, not just Microsoft, but any of these other product companies as well. All of the feedback they can get, intelligent feedback they can get from their user base, hopefully assist them in making a better product. So give them as much information as you feel free to. Don't reveal any personally identifiable information or anything. Um, Also, when you install Windows, by default, it will create what they call a recovery image. And it's usually on board on your primary disk drive. That's where, when you go into the Windows recovery environment, you can tell it, like on this next page here, keep my files, okay? Reinstall the operating system, all the Windows files, but keep my files. Now, if I determine that one of my files or a corrupted file of my personal data files is what's causing the problem, hopefully you have been backing those up on a regular basis. And hopefully you didn't back up some corrupt files, and you just strip it down to the bare metal, remove everything. Files, applications, operating system settings, the whole thing, and restore it from that restore section on your primary disk drive. And in some cases, if that recovery image happens to be corrupted, well, you can go from whatever your original medium was, downloaded file or download it again, or if it's on a DVD or a disk file, you can do that. Okay. Now, some of the things that you may encounter when you're troubleshooting, you start trying to boot your system up, doesn't boot. Okay. Sometimes you'll get a message, sometimes you won't. If it comes up and says, well, I can't find the operating system, and I'll tell you, I did this myself. For a while before I started using the hypervisor software, I was booting my system, and I was initially trying to learn Linux. Had my USB flash drive, I have it riding along right here, and I had my Linux distribution was on the USB flash drive. I actually gave you guys a document in that document dump download I gave you the other day, a file that shows you how to create a bootable USB flash drive with a Linux distribution on it. So when I was doing originally starting to teach the cyber classes, to demo a Linux operating system, I would plug the flash drive in, boot the system up from the USB flash drive. couple of times, and I finally got it a couple of times. When I was finished with that, I would just unplug the USB flash drive. But I had told the system when I booted it up from that, that's where you boot the system from. Then the next time I tried to boot the system, it come and say, sorry, I can't find your operating system because it was looking for it on the flash drive that wasn't plugged in anymore, right? So now you can program the boot record in your system to look in order, not just look in one place. You say, look for the USB flash drive, then look on the DVD. If you don't find an OS on either one of those, boot from the C drive. Okay. So, um, um, so different messages will tell you different things. Okay. Um, when you get those types of messages, think about, well, have I booted my system from somewhere other than my C drive? If so, were there changes made to the BIOS telling the system where to boot from, that kind of thing? Okay. And you may need to go in and reset those things. Again, that's that interrupt the boot process, go into the settings menu, change those things back if you've changed any of those. If your system all of a sudden, just for no particular reason, this morning it was running fine, this afternoon it's just slugging along. Well, may very well have been infected with some kind of malware. Okay. Or you may just need to do a restructure and a check disk, clean the disk, a defrag, that kind of thing. If the disk drive gets more and more and more fragmented, it wastes so much. And they're talking about hard disk drives here. It doesn't work like this on solid state. But it spends so much time seeking data because it's spread out all over the disk that the whole system seems to just run slug slow. Okay. Um, so, one of the main things you want to do there is, do a orderly shutdown, try to reboot the system. Because in the reboot itself, it does some of that cleanup automatically in Windows files here. I told you guys earlier about this blue screen of death, this guy right here. I hope you never encounter that. I truly do. But this is one area, in my opinion, where Microsoft really had seemed to have upped their game on helping you to troubleshoot the cause here. Now, I'll tell you, the blue screen of death typically informs you that you got a serious problem, and it could even be a hardware related problem. I've seen blue screen of death caused by a controller and a disk drive just went bad, burnt out, couldn't read the disk drive anymore, couldn't load the operating system. I've seen the blue screen of death occur when overheating burnt out some of the RAM cards and memory chips on the RAM cards, wouldn't boot up. So now, one cool thing here is these QR codes that they're beginning to use in many cases on these screens, not just blue screen of death, but other error screens as well. And you guys know you take your mobile phone, scan that code, and it immediately gives you a link to a website. And here, the Microsoft support gives you a link to the website, and it passes along the error information that's included in that quick response code, okay, and directs you straight to the documentation that may help you solve that problem. Okay. So that's pretty clever the way they've done that. And like I say, they seem to have upped their game quite a bit, in my opinion, on troubleshooting, especially as it relates to networking and security kind of functions there. I told you about this the other day, the time drift. That's that 2032 real-time clock battery. Okay. That's what keeps the system clock synchronized and synchronized with your network time protocol server, the Stratum server, as they call it. And it's the atomic clock synchronization there. If you have all of a sudden application programs that just for no particular reason have started crashing or hanging up, you get the spinning circle of death and it says not responding. Think about, when's the last time the system was working properly? Okay. And what has changed since then? I was telling you about the instance of me loading the new updates to my program editor, the Dreamweaver editor, and it causing all kind of problems with other Adobe products. The instant I roll back those changes, everything starts working fine. Okay. Um, So, just take it logically. Don't assume anything. Break the troubleshooting down to the lowest common denominator and think about the lines. When is the last time this system was working properly? And what has changed since then? More often than not, it has been some type of software or configuration change that is causing the problem. Okay. All right, my friends out on YouTube, I thank you all for joining us on the today. We are about to halt the broadcast on YouTube. I hope you all, if you're viewing out there, had a good time. And I hope to see you in a class not too distant future there. So once again, thank you very much for joining, and contact your CompTIA, your CED Solutions sales representative, and jump on in one of these classes. We have a lot of fun here. So y'all have a great day, and we'll see you next time around here for sure.